chapter leader for IDA, chairs the Light Pollution Subcommittee of the American Astronomical Society Committee on Light Pollution, Radio Interference, and Space Debris, and is vice president of the International Astronomical Union's Commission on Site Protection, i.e. light pollution. Of all of these, the local case, the small town of Northampton, Massachusetts, is arguably the most challenging. He grew up in partially on a 200-year-old farm in northwestern Connecticut and is a longtime follower and supporter of NOFA. Before we jump in, I just have a few details to review with you. Our land acknowledgement. As we work to heal the destruction caused by colonization, we appreciate your support, solidarity, and continued learning. Please recognize whose land you're attending from and add this to the chat. We'll put a link to the land map into the chat. Racial equity in the food system and caucus groups. Please join our caucus groups on Saturday, July 29th from 12:45 to 1:45 p.m. We'll have both BIPOC caucus and a White Ally caucus in Sheehan Hall. And with Buen Vivir as our theme, we aim to bring light to the ancestral wisdoms of indigenous peoples of the global south, including the Aymara, Quechua, and Machu people. We celebrate that restorative agriculture is rooted in longstanding cultural practices of Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. In an agricultural system built on stolen land and the forced labor and exploitation of Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, our conference aims to center equity in our food system. At NOFA, we encourage you to center racial equity in your daily life and your own community. Please think about some groups in your area that can help support racial equity and feel free to drop any ideas into the chat. We've brainstormed here on the slide, but we also encourage you to think about others that are local to you. We want to thank our sponsors who make this conference possible. We have our partner level sponsor, Stonyfield Organic, and other partner level sponsors. The sponsors helped make our conference possible, and we encourage you to purchase from them. When you do, please let them know you appreciate their support of nofamass. We'll be doing soil microbial evaluations at the in-person conference on Saturday. This is super exciting. We have a great team of soil health technicians who are psyched to look at your soil and provide you with technical assistance and recommendations. Please bring a small soil sample from home and visit the soil health table on Saturday. If you have questions about how to sample your soil, please email us at soilhealth@nofamass.org. And last but not least, we have the NOFA Summer Auction. If you have your smartphone handy, you can scan the QR code on the screen, or you can click on the link that's being dropped into the chat. The auction is entirely online, and we have some incredible items to bid on. Thank you for your attention, and I will turn it over to James now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christine, and welcome, and thank you all for coming to this workshop tonight. And let me just add to Christine's excellent introduction and Emma's excellent technical help, an invitation, please, to interrupt with questions at any time. I will try to monitor the chat, the Zoom chat. You can drop them in there. If that doesn't work, feel free to try to unmute. Emma and Christine, is that possible for people to do? And you can actually just say, excuse me, I have a question. That's totally fine. Happy to have that happen, and it'll be better, so don't hesitate. And now I will try to get this going this way. Open the chat as well. Okay, good. I think I'm ready to go. Here we are. This is a view that we might get in Chaco Canyon, New Mexico, one of the darkest places in the United States. where ancestral Puebloan people and the Diné consider that place to be their origin. Multiple of the Southwest Native American people consider Chaco Canyon to be the source of their people, and they consider the Milky Way to be a path to the ancestors, a path that they will eventually take. Some of them consider the individual stars to be individual ancestors of them. They literally see their own past in the sky, as well as their future. It's so dark in Chaco Canyon when there's no moon out that you have trouble to see your hand in front of your face. If the Milky Way is up and you're dark adapted, you can see your own shadow in the light of the Milky Way. But most people, most of us probably live in a place that looks more like this. No Milky Way. This is downtown Northampton, parking lot with the street lights on all night long, whether anybody is there or not. So very briefly, what this workshop is about is light pollution and what the problems are that it causes and how to fix it. First of all, what is light pollution? Light pollution is excessive artificial light at night, light that is going the wrong direction, is poorly aimed. It shines out or even up into the sky directly. It's light that shines through a neighbor's window. It's light that is on all night long, even when nobody's there. Why is this a problem? A few main reasons. It's bad for human health. It's bad for human safety. It's like a poke in the eye from a flashlight. We all know that to use a flashlight, you should point it at the ground in front of you, not in your own eye. Somehow we forget that when it comes to designing outdoor lighting. The light that shines directly in your eye reduces your safety. It doesn't improve it. It's a waste of money and energy. It causes the direct loss of the night sky, the Milky Way, our cultural heritage, our enjoyment, our ability to study the sky, and it's bad for all life, not just human life. All right, a little bit more on each of those in order. In what sense is light something so innocuous and presumably pure and helpful and benign as light? How could that be bad for health? Light pollution is associated with elevated rates of serious health problems, including the ones listed here. So serious that after numerous studies over the last 20 plus years, the World Health Organization considers shift work and sleep disruption to be carcinogens, and those come from light pollution. Excuse me. It's not just this one study. There are many studies that echo this result. Excuse me. In the United States, in Spain, in South Korea, hundreds of thousands of people studied, and there's as much as a factor of 2 elevated rate of serious illnesses like breast cancer and prostate cancer in the presence of light pollution. This map of Spain shows the light pollution as seen from outer space, and that's how they can correlate it with the cancer rates. How can this be? What's the possible mechanism? And in fact, it's quite simple. Our eyes are programmed to look for the setting sun. When the sun goes down, the amount of blue light drops dramatically. Our eyes detect that and send a signal to the brain that says, start producing melatonin. Melatonin is a super important hormone that cascades through your body and helps reset your entire body clock, your 24-hour clock that we all need for health and happiness and good sleep. It controls digestion and respiration and practically every body function. And that is disrupted in the presence of blue light at night. The old kind of light we used to have for hundreds of thousands of years, firelight, didn't do this. This plot shows for 3 different kinds of light how much blue light there is. For firelight, there's practically none, no suppression of melatonin. For the old-fashioned incandescent lights, same thing. But for new LED lights, there's a strong blue bump. That is a direct hit to what your eye is looking for. And that's why LEDs, unless they're carefully treated and chosen, not all LEDs are bad, but they have the potential to cause severe suppression of melatonin. That's why in 2016, the American Medical Association issued a report, a warning against using LEDs that were too blue. The blueness is measured with this number, like 3000 K. The higher the number, the bluer the light. And they said, don't use anything bluer than that, and preferentially significantly less blue. I beg your pardon. I'm home recovering from COVID, and I didn't anticipate this particular coughing fit right now, but I'll try to minimize it. How is it that light can possibly be bad for visibility? It's simple. Again, the light should go down only in this yellow zone. This plot shows a street light with light coming all over the place, but the yellow zone is the only part that's really useful. The rest of this we call the glare zone. This person standing far away from the light is blinded by this light, not helped by it. The light also causes light trespass. It shines right into the windows of this nearby building. It maybe even goes directly up into the sky. That is not useful light. It's worse than useless. It's harmful. There are lots of figures like this online. Here's a cartoon showing the same thing, a house with a bad light on one side, shining all over the place, including into the neighbors and up into the sky, and a good light on the other side, shining down only where it's useful. And, I'm sure you've all got neighbors or friends or relatives with bright lights in their backyards. And always the idea is, wow, security, it's for safety, so that I can see if there's an intruder. But if you put a light like this in your backyard, you can't actually see very well at all. If only you could sort of shield your gaze somehow, shield that bright glare from your eye like this, you would see that there's actually a guy standing there in the gateway. And he's there in the other picture too. You just can't see him because of the glare. So we don't need more light. We need better light, especially when it comes to anything like security. We have to just stop throwing the light around thoughtlessly. Light pollution is a waste of money and energy. This infographic captures some of the numbers. A minimum of $3 billion a year wasted. It's probably at least 10 times that, depending on how we slice what kind of light we consider to be waste. For example, we might look at all the roads around the country that look kind of like this, that are just lined with bright streetlights all night long, when nobody's even on the street, and realize that much less than 1% of that light ever reaches a human eyeball. So in that regard, well over 99% of outdoor light is actually wasted and causes harm. It robs us of the stars. Here is a view of downtown Northampton, where I live. And here is a view from just 11 short miles away from the city lights. And what a dramatic difference. Same camera, same lens, slightly longer exposure on the one on the right. But the light pollution in Northampton completely ruins the view of the sky. Milky Way, forget it. And this graphic conveys that sense of how much Milky Way you could see or couldn't see on a scale that we call the Bortle scale, which goes from 1 to 9, where 1 is pristine dark sky, and 9 is Las Vegas and Times Square. And you'll see that at a Bortle scale of around 5, which is about where Northampton lies, you can barely see the Milky Way at all. There are cities and towns all across Massachusetts that are teetering on the edge, and year by year, more of them drop over that edge to the point where the Milky Way just disappears. This is recognized by some big national and international organizations, not enough, but some. For example, the National Park Service is a big leader in this field. They have a night skies division, a natural sounds and night skies division that promotes appreciation of the night sky at the national parks. And they treat the night, they treat natural darkness as a natural resource, like clean air and clean water, that everybody and every living creature has a right to. And we have to protect that right. And here's the Starlight Declaration, International Declaration, that says this is a human right. Everybody has to be able to see the stars in the Milky Way, connect to their culture that way. And getting to the main point for us tonight, blue light at night is bad for wildlife. This screech owl needs darkness at night to thrive. all living beings need darkness at night to thrive. Um, of all mammals, about 3/4 are nocturnal, the rest diurnal, like this bat, nocturnal, like this hardworking opossum outside my house with her kids heading home after a hard night, and this red fox in my backyard hunts almost exclusively at night. But even the animals that are awake during the day need darkness at night, just as we do, to recover, to rest, to recharge, to sleep well. In the presence of light pollution, all the major functions of most of these animals are interrupted, from reproduction to foraging to migration to entire ecosystems that can be disrupted. Many of you know that birds are severe victims of this problem, or maybe you know about the poster child for light pollution, the sea turtles that are affected by light pollution. They hatch on the beach and they're programmed to head for the light of the stars glimmering on the ocean. Instead, they head for them all. When they turn around and head the wrong way away from the ocean, and they die of dehydration, they get picked off. The picture on the left shows birds that were killed striking buildings in Toronto, just in I think less than a year. It's estimated that 230,000 birds are killed in New York City alone every year, crashing into buildings, and that's essentially due to light pollution. 80% of migrating birds migrate at night. Many or most of them use the stars to navigate. So we just have to ask, what happens if they can't see the stars? The numbers are just staggering. It's as much as 1 billion bird deaths per year, every year in the US alone, due to light pollution. All of these birds are warblers that I photographed in just within a mile of my house, that in May migration, when they're busy flying up from the Caribbean or even from South America, some of them on their way to Canada to breed for the summer. They're flying at night. During the day, they're resting, they're feeding, which is what I see them doing here. But overhead, every night in May, there is a river, an ocean of migrating birds over your head. You can't see them, but they're up there by the hundreds of thousands and millions every night during migration. It's not just the creatures of the land and the air, it's also the creatures of the sea. Salmon, virtually all fish, plankton, all aquatic life is affected by light pollution, needs darkness and the natural rhythms of the lunar cycle to thrive. And insects, everybody's favorite insect, the firefly, threatened with extinction by light pollution. Here we see thousands upon thousands of fireflies on a warm July night here on Elwell Island in the middle of the Connecticut River between Northampton and Hadley as the moon sets. And fireflies need that darkness at night, that they're communicating to mate, and they avoid light polluted areas. We have a local hero here in Massachusetts. Avalon Owens got her PhD at Tufts University in Sarah Lewis's lab and is now at Harvard as a postdoc and is an expert on exactly this issue, the effect of light pollution on insects, and especially fireflies, but also all pollinators, moths, and others. And she and other colleagues of hers point out that it's not just the uplighting, which we astronomers care about, it's the downlighting too. Animals do not want any artificial light at night. This is a picture of the streetlight outside my house with bugs zipping and zooming around all night long. Most of those bugs are going to die. They should be doing something else. Some of those should be pollinating our gardens and our farms. But instead, they're attracted to the light, and it'll probably kill them. This is a list from one of Avalon Owens' papers of just, it's a list summarizing the effects for different behaviors of insects and different species of insects, what the effects are of light pollution. And you see it covers a huge array of important behaviors for many, many different insects. And it's not just her work, but many others over more than the last 20 years. To put some numbers on it, the total number of insect species is something like 5 million. Only about 1 million of those are described. One of the major ones is Lepidoptera, that's butterflies and moths. Of 180,000 species of those, almost all of them are nocturnal. And that includes, of course, pollinators. This work has gotten a lot of press. Here's a piece in the Guardian talking about the insect apocalypse and the role of light pollution. It's estimated that 1/3 of insects attracted to artificial light sources die before morning. In Germany, 100 billion insect deaths per summer. Results from a Dutch study showing that over 30 years, nocturnal species underwent steeper declines than diurnal species. So these are big numbers. It's a serious problem. And it's not just for the daytime pollinators like this monarch butterfly, but nighttime pollinators. Maybe this is not a pollinator, but it's a moth. It's a nighttime moth. This is a paper by some researchers in Switzerland who did an experiment on a hillside in the Alps where they measured the amount of visits by pollinating insects to wildflowers in the darkness, and then they put artificial light on them. And they found that the number of visits went down by 62% in the presence of the artificial light at night. And it went down by 20% during the day. So even when the sun came up and you would think, oh, the effects of the nighttime are gone, no, those insects have left for elsewhere. So it has lasting effects, negative effects. And I don't have to tell you, we depend on these pollinating insects for our food supply. So this is sort of an irony, isn't it? Because here in Northampton, as elsewhere in Massachusetts, as elsewhere in the Northeast and farther afield, there's a big effort now to attract pollinators and to support them with pollinator gardens. This is in the middle of my town of Northampton, where they recently redesigned this park a few years ago. They did a beautiful job, and they made space for a pollinator garden that was installed through the hard work of many volunteer hands from the local pollinator network. So they planted this beautiful pollinator garden that attracts pollinating insects by day, but by night they zap them with lethal death rays from these super bright lights. These lights are complete overkill. They're 10, 15 times brighter than they need to be, 10 to 15 times brighter than some parks in New York City. They are bluer than recommended by any of the experts, and the city refuses to back down on this and change their mistake. And it doesn't even achieve the desired purpose. What's the desired purpose? To keep this park safe from from bad behavior. But look, it didn't stop this guy from collapsing drunk on the park bench taking a nap. It doesn't stop people from sleeping in the park. Not that that should be illegal. Homelessness is not illegal. Being drunk is not illegal, but it just reflects. I mean, in fact, we should instead consider, well, what's the health of this guy who's trying to sleep under this terrible light that's too blue and too bright? And it's a lose-lose proposition. And we even go worse. We put up bug lights like this one in our backyards to kill bugs, and it does exactly that. Of course, the goal is kill mosquitoes, but it kills everything. It attracts all kinds of bugs and kills them. Here's one study showing, notice compared to the number 1 on this plot here, all the colored bars are below. That shows that the number of moth caterpillars only gets lower in the presence of light. On the left of the dashed line is in bushes next to a highway, and on the right side is in grass next to a highway. And there are different kinds of lights, LEDs, high pressure sodium, low pressure sodium. You can see some are worse than others. LEDs are the worst, but they're all bad. There's not one of these that goes above 1. Above 1 would be, oh, there are more caterpillars in the presence of light. Nope, always less. And fortunately, we know it's an easy solution. If you dim the lights, you attract fewer insects. It's not just, is the light on, it's how bright is the light. The brighter the light, the more it attracts them and then kills them. Again, there's lots of evidence for this. The evidence comes from not just 1, not just 2, but multiple avenues. This is just a short list of some of the major research institutes devoted to studying the effect of light at night on wildlife. The International Union for the Conservation of Nature, which is a United Nations level agency, has taken this very seriously. They have a whole working group devoted to light pollution. And they put out a resolution just a couple of years ago that calls for action to protect the natural world from light pollution. And they call for it by listing some recommendations, including these that you see here, which are essentially echoing what we've already talked about. And I was part of this advisory workshop that sent a report to the United Nations saying essentially the same thing, summarizing all the latest state of the science of the ill effects of light pollution on human and natural world and what to do about it, with our recommendations, including essentially a very strong overlap with the IUCN and everything else that I'm telling you tonight. Last year, World Migratory Bird Day, which is sponsored by National Audubon Society, adopted, every year they adopt a theme. Last year, the theme they adopted was light pollution, to put a focus on that, which I'm happy with. And more directly related to NOFA's main focus here, artificial light at night also affects plants directly. In addition to the pollinator issues that are so important for all of our food chain, here you see pictures at the top left and top right of soybean fields that are immediately flanked by a highway with bright lights. And wherever there's a bright light, you see there's a green patch there where the leaves have stayed green. They green out earlier and they stay green longer into the season. And you might think, well, that could be good, right? Maybe that's like having more daylight and it's going to lead to higher productivity. It's the opposite. It's disrupting the natural cycles, and in fact, the productivity goes down significantly. In the lower left is a picture of I think it's a maple tree next to a street light where the leaves are also in the cast of the street light. They're hanging onto the tree much longer into the fall, which is not the natural timing for that tree. So it's a disruption for natural growing cycle. So to summarize this section, before we talk about what to do about it, all life needs darkness at night, humans and non-humans. And here's an analogy. We all know that wetlands are an important resource for every part of the world practically. And frogs, for example, have adapted to living in the wetlands. And if you take the water away, we know what will happen. The frogs will die. But similarly, the frogs have also adapted and evolved to thrive with darkness at night. And if we take the darkness away, they also will die. It's just like taking the water away from a wetland. Light pollution is growing fast, and this is not good news. Here is a map of the United States in the 1950s showing light pollution in the 70s, in the late 90s, and projection for 2025. And you see that basically everything east of the Mississippi is in light pollution. It's estimated that over 90% of Americans live in places where they can't see the Milky Way now, and it's getting worse. It's getting worse very fast. This was an estimate from a couple of years ago, or measurements showing light pollution climbing slowly, and pointing out that in fact these gray areas are getting missed by the satellites that are looking down and measuring the light pollution, because they don't see the blue light coming from the new LEDs. And this is borne out by a newer result, just last year, that found after 10 years of studying citizen science results, that light pollution is growing at something like 10% per year. Population growth is only 1% per year. So light pollution is growing leaps and bounds faster than population. Here in Massachusetts, if you go to this wonderful website, lightpollutionmap.info, you can dial in, it shows you the whole world. You can zoom in, zoom out, it's like Google Maps, any part of the world, go to your town, and you'll find what's the light pollution like at your place. Here's Massachusetts. You see the big megalopolis of Boston and Providence and Hartford and Springfield. Here I am in Northampton. This is 2012. Here's 10 years later, or less than 10 years later. So there was 2012, 2021. So once again, 2012, 2021. And you can see the light pollution creeping out into the dark areas. The red is the worst here. You'd have to go to a dark blue or a black area to get anything approaching truly dark skies. And those are just rapidly disappearing in New England, as everywhere else. If you zoom in and click on any particular area, you get some numerical information. I'll just point out one of them here, right here, the ratio 31.2 focused on Worcester. This means that under the best conditions, which is to say clear, dark sky, no moon, under the best conditions, the sky over Worcester, the sky above Worcester, is 31 times brighter than naturally dark skies. Not just 31%, 31 times brighter than natural. There is no such thing as darkness in Worcester. How did this happen? How did we get there? Well, here's one example. This is my street. My house is on the right. The street light outside my house is right here. And I took this on a very special night when the street light was broken and it was off for 15 seconds and then on for 15 seconds. And it was an old fashioned high pressure sodium light, like the orangey pink ones that most of us grew up with until LEDs came along. And I knew the city was about to make a big mistake. We tried to stop it, but we couldn't. We lost the battle. I knew they were about to replace it with a bright new LED. So I took the picture of the street light, the old street light here when it's off, here when it's on. So that's off, that's on. I used to hate the street light. Now I long for it because here's what they replaced it with. That's now the street light outside my house. And I got them to put some shielding on and didn't do very well. We've improved the shielding, but it's still as bright as this, and the glare is terrible. And most of the street lights in the city are just like this. Okay, I would be remiss if I didn't also mention a new threat to the night sky that is coming not from the ground at all, but from space. These are all images taken by astronomical observatories or cameras or telescopes that have been photobombed by Starlink satellites, the more than 5,000 satellites that have already been launched by Elon Musk's company SpaceX to provide fast broadband internet down to the ground. And they are wreaking havoc with astronomy, and they threaten to actually brighten significantly the night sky overall. And I can talk about that more if you're interested, but it's a terrible threat that we're spending a lot of time working on in our community. Okay, how do we fix light pollution? This is a view again of Pulaski Park in downtown Northampton. What's wrong with these lights? They are they're going the wrong direction. All the light should be shielded. It should be shielded so the light goes down only. It should not be like this. It should be like that. Not like this, but like that. Not like this, but like that. Here we see very bad on the left and much better on the right. Here we see another diagram showing the productive light is only the light that goes down. The light that goes out sideways or up is bad and damaging and harmful and wasteful. For example, if you step outside your house tonight or go around your community, you will see tons of lights installed like this. Not good, not good. These lights have a hinge, and the installer put them on a hinge, put them at an angle that's like 45 degrees. And fortunately, we were able in Northampton to get the bank that owned these lights to fix that and put them exactly horizontal. I know, we all know what they were thinking to begin with. They were thinking, the lights here, we wanted to illuminate that parking lot over there. And so we'll send it over there, but they're not thinking how big the beam is. They're not realizing the beam is also sending light up into the sky, and that in fact, they can achieve their goal with the light horizontal, and the beam will go down and still a very wide beam. It'll cover the parking lot fine with less glare and with zero uplighting. We know what this concept is. We all know what it's like to go to a live theater. You sit in the audience, you look at the stage, and guess what? The lights are not poking you in the eye. The number one rule of theater lighting is do not shine the lights in the audience's eye. You can go to school and get a degree in theater lighting, and that's the number one rule. It's easy to achieve. You use a theater light like this one, where the light is sort of recessed in a can, and then they have these barn door shields to make sure that you don't blind the audience. The people on the stage, the performers, well, the light's shining right in their eyes. They can't see anything except each other, maybe. They can't see the audience, but the audience can see everything, including each other, because they're not blinded by glare. So why do we forget that when it comes to outdoor lighting? Number two, gotta minimize that blue light. Cut it out, just eliminate it. It's bad on all accounts. I would hate to live in this development in Northampton with this light shining in my bedroom window all night long. It's possible. The technology is there. Remember, I said it's measured in this number of Kelvin degrees, and less than 3,000 that's the absolute maximum that we should allow. 2,700 is now pretty common, and 2,200 is now widely available, including right here in Massachusetts. The town of Pepperell and the town of Rockport have both installed 2,200 K. That's now getting close to very close to the same color as the old high pressure sodium lights that we had for 50 years that nobody complained about. Those were sold as, oh, the new golden light. It's better than these horrible blue lights. But then when the LEDs came along, they marketed them as, oh, they're like daylight. That's better than the golden light. That's just marketing. Now the technology is available, and we have to push our communities hard. There's a lot of pressure from the industry to go with much bluer lights than are healthy or good for the environment. We've got to minimize the brightness. We're just overlighting everything by factors of 10 to 100. And it's easy to control. For example, this picture shows a street light with this little cap on top of it. Here's a close-up of the cap. You've seen this before. That's a photocell that's looking for darkness at night, looking for the sun to go down so it can turn the light on. You can get ones that have a little timer in them, or a dimmer that say, oh, at midnight, cut it down to 50% or 25%. Or you can get a networked one so that your town manager can control it on their cell phone, light by light if they want to. The technology is there. All of this is summarized in these 5 rules. These are like the motherhood and apple pie of controlling light pollution, the 5 principles for responsible outdoor lighting. And they're produced by 2 formerly competing organizations, the International DarkSky Association, called DarkSky now, and the Illuminating Engineering Society. But they got together and came up with these 5 general rules that summarize everything we just said. All light should have a clear purpose. Don't just stick a light on a building for no reason. Light should be directed only to where needed and shielded against everything else. No brighter than necessary. Used only when it's useful. Turn it off otherwise, and use warmer colors wherever possible. So you can, here's an idea. Get your city or town or institution to adopt these 5 principles. It'll start the conversation. It's a very low bar. There's no commitment here. There's no money. There are no numbers. Even the color doesn't mention 3,000 K. It's just the concept. Get them talking about the concept and get them to adopt these values, and then you can talk more specifically. You may get pushback, or people might say, well, good lights aren't available. Like only these crummy lights are available. No, that's not true. You could have gotten a light that looked just like this, but it's not sending light up into the sky. How about these? Smith College has great lights. These are a light in a can facing down. It's just what you want. Warm color. Here in Northampton also, we've convinced a number of businesses to change their poorly aimed lights to be more dark sky friendly. Here's a good light. Here's a great walkway light. If you have a porch light that looks like this, ye olde brass and glass lantern style, that's got a light bulb in it, sending light in all directions, replace that light bulb with one like this that's sending light down only, and that has a warm color and low lumen. If you need a pathway light, don't use those ones that are solar powered and that send light up into the sky that's really blue. Use ones like this. This is $10, and it's completely shielded against glare. You just have to mount it at knee height or hip height on a little stick of wood, a little post in the ground, or a wall by the walkway or whatever. And it's solar powered. It's got a rechargeable battery. Nice, warm, mellow light, fully shielded against glare. Well, where can you get these things? Where can you find out more about what kind of fixtures to get? Go to darksky.org. They have a whole program for evaluating thousands upon thousands of light fixtures out there for their friendliness to dark skies. Here's another one at the observatory at Mont Mégantic in just to the north of us in Quebec. Similar program. What if you just want to go to the store and buy some good lighting? Go to Home Depot, for example. They have dark sky friendly lighting at Home Depot. You just have to look for it. You go to Lowe's, you will find that they have on their display racks dark sky friendly lighting, and they even advertise it as such. These lights will be totally fine. They're a light in a can facing down, just the way you want it. Is it regulated? Not enough. Here in Massachusetts, we're trying to get the dark sky bills passed. We're happy to have your help if you're a Massachusetts resident. Very happy to have you contact your senator and representative state legislature and ask for their support or thank them for their support for these two parallel bills, one in the House, one in the Senate, that would institute common sense best practice for outdoor lighting in Massachusetts. And we just testified last week in the State House before the relevant committee, and we have another hearing coming up in October. Massachusetts is the last state in New England to pass any kind of regulation of outdoor lighting. That's an embarrassment, but here we are. And the city of Northampton passed a resolution saying, we support this. We're a city that thinks this would be a good thing to pass. You could maybe get your city to do that as well, city or town. So I'll just wrap up with a summary here. Light pollution is bad. It's bad for animals, for plants, for human health, for public safety. It's a total waste of money and energy. It ruins quality of life, and it ruins the incredible beauty of the night sky and our ability to study it. And it's easy to fix. It's a global problem with a local solution. You turn the light off, the problem goes away instantly. It's not like water pollution or air pollution that sticks around for a long time. It goes away instantly. So with that, I'll just leave you with this video of Comet Neowise, which maybe some of you saw here in the agriculturally rich Connecticut River Valley during the middle of the pandemic. This was a bright spot in many people's lives. This comet appeared, and it really united people. They could go outside and see this beautiful visitor from outer space, and most people couldn't see it because of light pollution. This was one of the brightest comets in many people's lives so far, and you had to make efforts to see it. My hope is that you will help us in this effort, which is an international and growing movement to protect natural darkness at night for all the reasons we talked about. And now I would be really happy to stop, share, and take questions from anybody and hear your thoughts.
Thank you, James. That was wonderful. I know I learned a ton, and I am gonna end this presentation and go just change my lights and close my curtains and everything. So thank you. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to either just raise your hand, speak up, put it in the chat. I have a question. So you showed the worsening light pollution that was correlated and that just changed over time, even though you said that population growth was increasing at roughly 1%, light pollution was increasing at roughly 10%. Is that attributed to just the increased adoption of LED use, or is there some other factor that's contributing to this?
That's one of the main ones, yes. In addition to population growth, there's also development that people move into new homes, new developments, and that always comes with new light. So even if you kept the population stable, most areas of the United States are developing outside of cities as well. It's not just confined to cities, but it's really the advent of LEDs that have changed it completely. That have made this huge spike, is this sudden ramp up. LEDs are energy efficient compared to old technologies, and the government and the industry have pushed them very, very strongly and have made lots of incentives. And the only thing they focused on is how efficient the light is in terms of lumens per watt, like how much light you get out versus how much energy you have to put in. So what happened is cities and towns just focused, and individuals just focused on how efficient they were instead of trying to limit the amount of light. So instead of using less energy, we're using the same amount of energy, but producing much more light. Just think about it. Hey, I could actually spend less money on my energy bill and I get more light. That seems like a net positive, doesn't it? Until you think about the cost of light pollution, it seems like a net positive. That was the problem.
Thank you. And we'll go with Carol's question, and then we can address the questions in the chat. Carol.
I just wanted to comment that thank you so much for this presentation. And, we've heard some of it before, and it bears repeating. And I immediately thought, oh yes, I'm pulling the shades in the room that we spend the evening in for sure. But we went a year or two ago to Acadia, and it was very overcast, and it was a debate whether we really wanted to go to this night sky program they were offering. And we finally decided to go. And it was all lit, the railing down to the beach with a string of red lights, and 300 yards across the beach to get to where everyone was. And we were surprised how many people were there. And he said, oh yes, it doesn't usually stop people. We talk about the constellations, and we use a laser pointer, and we all just lie here. So if you ever have a chance to go to such a thing, just go. Because he said, we talk about where the constellations would be, and then people go home and then they look for them when the sky is clear. But it was just such a nice experience to see and hear about using at least red light in cases like this.
Thank you, Carol. That is great to hear. And I work closely with a number of people associated with the national parks, and very happy to hear that from your visitor perspective.
Thank you. And going to the chat, Marissa and Drew asked if you could talk more about Starlink. I was wondering about that too.
Sure. Can you say a little bit more about what you would like to hear about, especially? Which aspect of the Starlink problems? Like why it's a problem, or how we're trying to fix it, or?
Marissa or Drew, do you want to unmute yourselves and ask, or I can kind of follow up with my own question? Yeah, so I was just really interested. I've not heard anything about it, and I was kind of interested in how it could threaten the night sky, like you were saying, overall, and just the impact, and then also if there's anything we can do about it. I mean, it seems like it might be a kind of legislative issue, but if there's anything that can be done in the meantime.
The impacts are potentially mostly in the following ways. The launch of the satellites, the operation of the satellites, and the deorbit of the satellites. The launches are happening every 2 weeks. They're happening in sensitive areas like Boca Chica, Texas, and Cape Canaveral, Florida. They cause a huge amount of air pollution, and sometimes the rockets explode and cast debris over many miles. And those are sensitive ecological areas. The launches are so frequent now and so big and getting bigger that they're actually they're contributing a larger and larger chunk of global greenhouse gases. So the launches are damaging. In the operation phase, the satellites, many of you have probably seen the satellites crossing the sky, maybe in a chain of bright lights. They are bright, bright things when they're first launched. They're as bright as the brightest stars in the sky. I've seen them numerous times. And it's sort of an awe-inspiring and terrifying and depressing sight all at once. They eventually get dimmer, they get fainter, to the point where they're about naked eye brightness, close to, depending on the person and the location. But that's just Starlink, and that's just the current mode of Starlink. And they're producing more. They're producing ones that are bigger. That might well be brighter. They're going to, paint them black. They've been spending millions of dollars trying to fix this problem, but what they're not doing is stopping the launches. And that's just one company. There are many other companies. There are over 500,000 satellites planned for launch in the next 10 years worldwide. Country of Rwanda planning 300,000 satellites of its own. Every nation wants its own so-called constellation or mega constellation of satellites to have its own security over fast internet and communication. So in operation, they're bright and getting brighter. There are some, there's another company called, I forget, it's not Blue Origin, it's Blue Sky, I think it's Blue Sky, that is going to be as bright as the very brightest stars in the sky all the time. So that is going to affect animals that depend on, and they're moving, they're low Earth orbits, they move across the sky. So imagine all the stars in the sky are moving. And on a typical clear night, you can see in dark sky about 5,000 stars. We already have 5,000 artificial satellites operating that are big, and most of those have, at least during part of their phase, been naked eye. And then they eventually will crash into each other and cause debris, or there is leftover spent fuel or little bits of paint. That already happens. It's already reflecting sunlight down and making the sky brighter. And if we multiply by many, as we're planning to, the number of satellites, and if the debris continues to accumulate, especially if they crash into each other and cause more debris, then the night sky is predicted to get as bright as 3 or 4 times brighter than natural just from that alone. And then finally, there's deorbit. They come down through the atmosphere and burn up, which then distributes aluminum and other material into the ocean or onto the land. And it's estimated that it's already exceeding the natural amount of aluminum deposited by meteors that fall on the Earth every day. That's a summary of the problems. And we're trying at all levels, from all different branches of federal government in the United States to United Nations. We have a lot of programs going to try to solve this problem. It's a real uphill battle. It's very it's very hard to. We're shoveling against the tide. The tide is this very capitalist, technological, completely colonial mindset. That space is there to be. It's a resource to be used by the first people who get there, and everybody else be damned.
That's incredible. Thank you. And Marissa and Drew followed up also with thank you. And their question was similar, just in terms of whether the impact of the satellites becomes less as they get higher, stabilize in orbit, which I think you addressed to some extent.
Yes, it does become less as they get higher and stabilize. But the lifetime of typical satellites these days is only 5 years, and in order to keep, so Starlink is planning a constellation of 40,000 satellites. In order to keep that going, they're constantly launching new ones, which means that you never reach a point where 100% of them are in this stable situation. There's always a flux where about 10% of them are on their way up or down, which contributes to the problem.
Incredible. Thank you. So I think Emma asked a question. As a vegetable grower, I am curious if excess light affects nutrient density and absorption.
I am afraid I don't know the answer to that, and I don't know if anybody does. I don't know if that's been studied. Good question. I will file that one away and ask my biologist experts, but I'm going to guess that particular angle has not been attacked or approached.
Tim is wondering, have you made this presentation to pollinator groups, such as the pollinator pathway or pollinator network?
Yes, I made it. I gave a presentation a year or two ago that's to the Western Mass Pollinator Network that is accessible through their archive talks. But happy to do more.
And Wendy is wondering, in your experience, what are the arguments that folks use against modifying lighting?
It's all about fear. It's fear of the dark. It's fear of intruders. It's fear of strangers. It's a totally emotional response. Maybe it's in our DNA that we should be afraid of the dark. You know, I've had that before. Most of us have. The question is, what do we do with that response? So it's very hard to fight against that, because I've given you lots of facts and figures and rational arguments. That does not convince people, most people. I would call this a very receptive audience, but you're not a typical audience for decision makers and the general public. And most people who just stick a wall pack on a building, or a garage light that's blasting bright blue LED light out into outer space from their garage, whether they're there or not, they're just thinking it's called a security light. It must be good for security. And the police echo that. The police generally confirm that. And the police, if only they realized, that's making it more likely there's going to be a fatal crash right there, because some driver is going to be blinded and is going to hit a pedestrian or a cyclist. And there's evidence for that, but that we haven't, we've had trouble getting those messages across. That's what we're trying to do. So I think the solution is we have to accentuate the beauty and the magic and the benefits to natural nighttime. Talk about how special it is, how important it is, and how we need it. And we have to get people outside to see it, and lead night walks, and do what Carol talked about, going to Acadia National Park, and only then, if we get people to see that dark sky that most of us are missing in our homes, then I think we'll have a chance of protecting it.
Wendy has a question. Go ahead, Wendy.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on that. I really appreciate your answer to that last question. But most people in cities have never seen stars. I mean, people born and raised and living in cities, they've never ever seen the true night sky. So how, it seems like a conundrum to get people to care, because they've never even seen it. So how can they care?
That is a serious challenge. You've got that exactly right, Wendy. At the same time, those people are suffering the most from the most light pollution.
I know.
And I didn't mention, but I will now. I've given you, I would say, the 5 major areas of concern. The night sky is only one of them. There's also human health, wildlife, energy waste, and safety, crime and safety. And depending on who you're talking to, you might not even mention the night sky. I often give this talk where I just barely mention the night sky at all, because
it would resonate.
Right.
Yeah. I just find it stunning that your town of Northampton couldn't get behind, you're not saying no light, you're saying modify the light. I find it stunning.
It's been deeply frustrating. We're making progress, but it's just very slow. It's incremental, it's grassroots. What we're not getting is the leadership at the top. Which, it's okay. If the leadership at the top happened and it all happened quickly, that'd be great. But almost always it doesn't, and almost always you need grassroots work. See, Carol has a hand up.
My husband mentioned that, maybe one approach that I guess was taken in our little town of Princeton, which looked fairly dark on the map, right around Wachusett Mountain and everything, thank goodness, was that apparently there was enough people speaking out that they took out some of the street lights and just put focus down lights at intersections. And so that's one approach.
That's so great. Yeah, in a small town, just one person can make such a difference if it falls on the right ears at the right time. So I'm so glad to hear that.
And Kim posed a question in the chat. Where is the documentation that bright unshielded lights reduce safety in my city? The police push bright lights.
Yes, in almost every city they do. There is documentation coming out of the let's see, at RPI, Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. They have a big transportation and a big lighting research center, and in Virginia Tech. And Ron Gibbons is one of the main authors doing much of this research. There's a dark sky advocate in Houston named Debbie Moran. So there's a website which I'll just look up. It's called Soft Light, I think. Light Houston. Yes, here it is. And I will drop the link into the chat. There it is. That website has a lot of links to the ill effects of glare on roadway visibility. She's one of the leaders of the effort to involve police chiefs nationwide in this education effort to show them, no, look, if you cause glare, it's bad. Unfortunately, I would say the research world has been slow to come up to speed on this. And so we're still trying to convince decision makers. Well,
This has been fantastic.
Okay.
Are there any other questions from anyone?
I hope you all enjoy very much the rest of the conference, and that it's productive and inspiring.
Carol has another question.
Who has an in with Elon Musk?
Ooh, we've had direct conversations. I've been on calls with Elon Musk and not been terribly impressed. Who has an in with Elon Musk? Indeed, come on, we're talking about the richest guy in the world. I mean, Congress doesn't have an in with Elon Musk. It's just a classic case of American capitalist robber barons benefiting from use and abuse of a public commons, in this case the night sky.
Yes. They have also mostly simply been courageous, brave, whatever, and taken research, many of them that was developed using taxpayer dollars by the Army, the Navy, NASA, whatever, and simply, I guess there has been some talk on NPR stations about how we should change laws so that you don't just take the technology that has been developed for, in science for the common good and run with it and make billions of dollars on it. So I don't know if that's something to try and look into it as individuals, as voters, as whatever. But well, please keep talking to him. I'll send good energy that something gets through.
Thank you.
Thank
you
you.
for that, Carol. Thank you everybody so much, and have a good rest of your night.
Thank you, James. We do have a couple following or concluding